Recording this in the morning this week, so coffee. Court expansion is back in the news again after the unfortunate passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Republicans seem poised to push through a nominee during a presidential election despite their claims in 2016 that this would be inappropriate, and Democrats have begun to state their intent to expand the court if this happens. However, it's worth discussing all of the different much-needed reforms of the Supreme Court outside of this particular boondoggle. But don't worry, we will talk about court expansion as well. Stick around till the end of this video and I'll tell you why the court shouldn't be expanding by just 2 seats, but instead by 15. The Supreme Court comes into vogue whenever there's a presidential election or whenever a vacancy on the court needs to be filled. In between, few of us really care what happens on the High Court. However, our general tendency to ignore the court outside of those particular instances has caused it to accumulate quite a bit more power than the framers had in mind, as well as develop rust on the mechanisms that are failing to keep up with our changing nation. Let's start looking at some of the various reforms that we would benefit from seeing on the Supreme Court. First, Supreme Court justices need term limits. The original intent behind life tenure was that it was supposed to insulate the Supreme Court from becoming too political. Now, there are plenty of reasons to believe that the framers should have known how foolish this was when they did it, but nonetheless, the Supreme Court has become just about as partisan as every other branch of government. While there are a few notable exceptions, and those exceptions do garner a lot of tension, there's a strong correlation between the political party of the president who appoints a Supreme Court justice and that Supreme Court justice's legal opinions. Almost all SCOTUS decisions nowadays come down to a 1 or 2 vote margin. Unanimous decisions are the distinct minority nowadays. The fix is 18-year term limits. The game theory that currently goes into whether or not a justice should retire is a dangerous and ineffective way of staffing the court. We shouldn't be burdening these justices with trying to find the optimal president-Senate combination in order for them to feel comfortable leaving the court. And then there's the nomination process. Currently, the party that controls the ability to nominate and confirm a court isn't incentivized to find the best possible justice to be on the court. Instead, they're incentivized to find the youngest possible justice that acceptably shares their ideology. An 18-year term limit increases the pool of people who would be considered for the court by taking away the incentive that a party has to nominate the youngest possible justice. And it normalizes and standardizes regular turnover of justices, which takes away the guesswork of how influential any single president or Senate will be on the future opinions of the Supreme Court. Keep in mind that lifetime tenure is not explicitly prescribed by the Constitution. Then there's the matter of transparency. A fun fact that you might not know is that all 8 current Supreme Court justices and the recently departed Ruth Bader Ginsburg supported opening up the court to broadcast media when they were originally confirmed, yet it still hasn't happened. In fact, it's illegal to even demonstrate or assemble outside the building that the Supreme Court is housed in. So the Supreme Court is unusually insulated from the public. But citizens and voters have a right to some transparency into the deliberations of a court that has extraordinary power over their daily lives. Now, while cameras aren't allowed inside the court, justices are willing and eager to get in front of them if it suits their needs, especially when it comes time for them to try to sell a book. The public appearances of Supreme Court justices should be disclosed well in advance of them happening. And recordings or transcripts of them, if not video, should be made available to the public at large in one central location. The opinions of our Supreme Court justices are really important, and they shouldn't be relegated to the select few of us who just happen to have the opportunity to witness them. Next is ethical accountability. All federal judges in America are bound by the Code of Conduct for United States judges. All of them except the 9 that sit on the Supreme Court. Now, none of the current judges have committed any offenses that would warrant removal under this code, but they're also not bound by any legal responsibility to recuse themselves in the event of conflicts of interest. They're also not forced to make any financial disclosures that would reveal any potential conflicts of interest like other federal judges who are bound by the code do. While we're at it, why don't we reform how we handle investments in financial disclosures? Supreme Court justices should be required to divest any holdings they have in stocks of private companies. or at least transfer them to a blind trust. Furthermore, they should be required to provide and maintain readily available financial disclosures into their personal finances so that the public has an opportunity to be aware of any potential financial conflicts of interest. And finally, we need to expand the size of the court. The Constitution does not set the number of seats that the court will have. It gives that power to Congress. The first Congress set it at 6, but it is continuously expanded to keep up with the growing size of the country and the growing number of judicial circuits within the country. It changed 3 times in the 1800s, getting as high as 10 justices in 1863 before coming back down to 9 in 1869. In 1937, FDR proposed that a Supreme Court justice be added for every sitting justice that refuses to retire after the age of 70 and a half years old, up to a maximum of 15 total justices. His claim was so that this would ease the burden on aging justices. However, it was generally accepted that he was trying to pack the court with justices who would support his New Deal policies. He ended up having the opportunity to appoint 7 new justices anyway, so he never really went through with this proposal. So throughout the 1800s, Congress expanded the court by 3 to keep up with the growing country. However, since then, 9 states have been added to the Union, and yet we have no new judges. I think that the Supreme Court should expand by at least 2 judges to compensate for the recent justice hoarding that we've seen by Mitch McConnell, but the main thrust of my argument for expanding the court really doesn't have anything to do with that. First of all, it's really strange to me to think that any 9 people would be able to represent the vast diversity of legal minds that we have across this country. Even if there was regular turnover of the court, 9 would be far too few. Plus, we put ourselves in a situation where we get really anxious every presidential election trying to predict which justice might die or retire during that administration and the ideological shift that it would cause in the court. No 1 or 2 justices should be able to cause a shift that big. Right now, we're seeing a situation where, depending on who replaces Ruth Bader Ginsburg since her passing, we could have entire swaths of legislation that will be interpreted radically differently than if she would have lived. We shouldn't let 1 or 2 people have that much control over our lives. Instead, we should gradually increase the size of the court to at least 27 judges, but I'm open to hear arguments for more. And no, I'm not crazy. I don't think that the next president should just be allowed to confirm 15 judges, but I don't think it's unreasonable to gradually add 2 or 3 justices every couple of years so that we limit the influence that any one administration or Senate will have on the court in the long term. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you're surprised that some of this stuff isn't already the law, but that's mostly because we really don't pay that much attention to how the court works. It's complicated and it's boring and they wear robes, so we sort of just kind of treat them like this noble, untouchable part of the government. But they're not untouchable, and we should be paying a lot more attention to what happens on the court. It has a ton of influence on our lives and the lives of voters across the entire country, so let's start putting much more effort and attention into making sure that the High Court is in optimal working condition. I relied on the work of Jacob Hale Russell, Larry Kramer, Jonathan Turley, and a nonpartisan legal organization called Fix the Courts when preparing for this video. I'll put links to them down below so that you can read more if you're interested.